Hey guys, it's Chris. From airplanes buried in the sand of the desert to bombs growing in a lady's garden, let's take a look at 10 of the wildest discoveries recently dug out of the ground. Number 10. Bomb in the garden. What's the last thing you expect to find when weeding your garden? A golden ring? Maybe a dinosaur bone? How about a bomb from World War II? Talk about a bomb of a surprise. That was exactly how a resident of Weymouth felt when her spade hit an old bomb buried 10 inches deep in her garden in May of 2020. She didn't even know if it was a bomb at first and thought it was nothing but a muddy rock. However, noticing something strange, the woman took it inside and cleaned some of the dirt off, then went on Facebook to ask people what they thought it was. Turned out it was a bomb, and not only a bomb, but an armed and extremely dangerous bomb. The woman called the authorities, and hours later the police did a controlled explosion of the bomb at Weymouth Beach and disposed of it. How would you feel if you found a bomb in your garden? Talk about a dangerous Easter egg hunt. Fussing with the tomatoes, pulling up some weeds, poking at the dirt, then a bomb. A bomb forgotten from World War II blows your strawberries to smithereens. Number 9. Burial grounds found in New York. The last thing New York expected in 1991 was to hear about the unearthing of an old burial ground from the 17th century. This wasn't any ordinary burial ground either. This old graveyard contained the human remains of over 15,000 African descendants, and it was discovered underneath Lower Manhattan. What an ugly reminder of the past. The federal construction site in Manhattan stumbled upon the largest single colonial-era collection of remains of enslaved and freed Africans in the USA. And the craziest part is that they weren't even going to stop construction. It took a string of protests to halt the project and properly see the bones of men, women, and children exhumed and cared for. The remains were then able to be researched by a diverse team of chemists, geneticists, anthropologists, and even archaeologists. It ended up being an impressive discovery from America's dark and haunted past, and a grim reminder of the country's roots. As for the construction site, I would hate to have been the poor guy who invested all that money only to have their project interrupted by an unearthed graveyard. It's like something out of a horror movie. Number 8. Medieval hospital underneath Madrid Apple Store. Apple stores are everywhere. From Los Angeles to Hong Kong, there's an Apple store in almost every major city. But guess what they found when the new Madrid Apple store was under construction in 2013? No, it wasn't alligators in the cellar. It was the bones of a 15th century medieval hospital. While doing the renovations for the new Apple store, the outer walls of the hospital were found. The hospital was originally demolished in 1854, and it almost seems like the city forgot all about it. The hospital was adjacent to another recent 2009 discovery of an old church that had also been demolished. The church ended up halting the construction of a train station for a full 10 months while the ruins were properly preserved. They can now be seen behind glass partitions in the station's mezzanine. If you ask me, it seems like old Madrid has an entire medieval city resting beneath its streets. This particular hospital was constructed in the 15th century to deal with victims of the Black Plague, along with its neighboring church. And while the developers were aware that there could be some archaeological discoveries during construction, this was still one spooky surprise. Number 7. Airplanes in the desert. Talk about crazy discoveries. Check out the airplanes discovered by U.S. search teams while hunting in Iraq for totally unrelated ordnance. They found dozens of hidden fighter jets covered by the desert sands, supposedly belonging to Iraq's Air Force. Nobody had previously known they were there. There was at least one confirmed MiG-25 Interceptor discovered from the era of the Cold War, found when the American searchers noticed a tall fin jutting out of the sand in the desert. Additional search teams found more MiG-25s and Su-25s buried west of Baghdad. These airplanes are some intense ground attack jets, and U.S. military officials think they were buried to stay safe until after the war ended, since Iraq had known they were outmatched by the American and British Air Forces. There was some debate over whether the buried airplanes would ever fly again, since they were buried basically with no protection and were riddled with sand. Plus, some of the planes were survivors of the Soviet era and the Gulf War, so they were already really old. All I can say is that if you want to hide a stockpile of airplanes from your enemy, at least maybe throw a tarp over them. And now for number 6. But first, let me know if you've ever found something exciting before, and be sure to subscribe to World List if you haven't already. Number 6. Gold coins in the backyard. There was a story in 2014 about the luckiest couple in history. Can you imagine winning the lottery without ever buying a lottery ticket? Well, a California couple stumbled upon a secret stash of buried gold worth roughly $10 million. That's one heck of a jackpot. During a walk from the edge of their frequent hiking trail, the couple spotted an old can. After poking at it with a stick, then moving in for a closer inspection, they discovered the can was filled with gold coins. To spice up the story even more, it came to light that the coins may have been lost after a heist of the US Mint in the year 1900. That's over 100 years ago. The problem with the gold coming from the US Mint, plus being involved in a crime, is that the people are going to have one difficult time trading them for the $10 million they're worth. Technically, if the story is true, the gold coins belong to the government. It's like learning your winning lottery ticket was a misprint, and it's invalid. What a bummer! But the real question here is, what happened to the heisters? Who in their right mind leaves cans of gold just lying around in the wilderness? Number 5. Nuclear fallout shelter. You buy a home and you move in, and everything's great. There are no rats in the rafters, no ghosts haunting the place, nothing out of the ordinary. Then you stumble upon a nuclear fallout shelter from the 1960s, complete with everything you would expect to find in one of these nuclear-age dungeons. This is exactly what happened to a couple in California after they bought their new house. And while the existence of the fallout shelter was explained to them prior to purchase, they merely thought it was some crackpot hole in the backyard. They had no idea they were buying a home with a very real and very well-designed shelter in the backyard from the age of nuclear fear, back when tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union were at an all-time high. The shelter was actually designed and built by a nuclear engineer in 1961. It's exactly 15 feet below the ground, which is the sweet spot for surviving a nuclear holocaust, or so they say. The shelter came complete with sleeping areas, a water tank, and even air filter worked by a hand crank. It was stocked with cookies, multi-purpose food, coffee, and protein mix. Everything inside the vault came as authentic vintage 1960s nostalgia. I definitely wish I had one of these in my house, just for the nostalgic value alone. Number 4. Underground FERRARI. It seems like everyone is finding gold in their backyard these days, but how about back in 1978 when two kids from Los Angeles came upon a legit FERRARI dyno 264 FTS buried in some guy's backyard? This green FERRARI at the time was worth a clean $18,000 new. And even though it was buried beneath the dirt, it was in surprisingly good condition. Apparently, the car was actually reported stolen years before the kids dug it up. It was reported at the time that detectives had even been tipped off as to where it was, but obviously they had just never found it. It took a couple of curious kids playing in the backyard to uncover this previously stolen FERRARI. The biggest mystery in 1978 was how the purported car thief had ever managed to bury the FERRARI in the backyard with anyone even knowing. And also why. What kind of crazed criminal would forfeit their brand spanking new FERRARI, ill-gotten or otherwise, to just bury it in the dirt? It makes you wonder exactly what happened. And even more, it makes you wonder exactly who the FERRARI belonged to in the first place. Number 3. Skeletons in Buckingham construction site. You may be familiar with Buckingham as the place where the Queen of England lives. And while Buckingham Palace is certainly the famous abode of the royal family, the town of Buckingham in the southeast of England has recently become the site of a ghoulish discovery. In December of 2019, in the middle of an excavation for a new retirement settlement, workers discovered a grisly cemetery of totally unknown origin. The team unearthed 40 human skeletons, and to make things even spookier, each of the skeletons had their own hands tied behind their backs as if prisoners. And they were all buried in extremely shallow graves, as if in a hurry. If I were looking for a retirement home, I think I would have to choose one not built over top of a creepy ancient graveyard. What do you think? Local experts suggest that the skeletons, judging by their morose positions and the depths of their graves, were almost certainly prisoners. And it seems to me the chances of a haunting rise exponentially in the case of prisoners and brutal murders. Hauntings and spookiness aside, it is more than likely that the bodies came from the age of the Anglo-Saxons, somewhere between 410 and 1066 AD. However, they may be much younger, perhaps from the English Civil War. Whatever the case, this is one crazy discovery. Number 2. Buried ship on land. Ships on land are nothing new. Hurricanes, floods, and other natural disasters have left a lot of boats washed ashore to be forgotten about. However, in North Carolina, a father and son discovered an unusually old boat, approximately 100 years old and fully buried on their property. The man and his son had first purchased the massive plot of swampland outside Nashville because they'd once been the site of a gold mine. Initially, the family had been wanting to hunt for either gold or fossils. Then, after a recent drought that had left the land extremely dry, pieces of steel and wood revealed themselves exposed above the ground. They were sure surprised to dig up what is now believed to be a vessel called the Robinson Gold Dredge, which had first been built in New York in the early parts of the 1900s. The boat had been shipped in pieces to North Carolina to be rebuilt. Somewhere along the line, it had been abandoned. My question is, how do you lose a boat that's 94 feet long, 32 feet in width, and 7 feet deep? I mean, if you know, can you please explain it to me? Number 1. Discoveries of Oak Island. In the year 2000, we're really starting to run short of mysteries, at least here on Earth. With our immense technology, our global positioning systems, and our growing narcissism towards anything not reality, it is hard to find a legitimate mystery. But not on Oak Island. This island has been the stuff of legends for years, and it's not all fiction. Located in Nova Scotia, Canada, Oak Island is believed to hold some very ancient secrets. And while I won't get into the immensely complicated theories surrounding the island, I will tell you about some of the impressive discoveries pulled out of the ground. First is the Spanish coin believed to have been created many years ago in the 17th century. This was one of the first big finds that pushed treasure hunters to keep digging. Years later, there was a treasure trove of relics found inside a hole. Among the relics was a Roman sword, which lends some truth to the theory that Romans had made it to Canada before anyone else. However, they also found Portuguese carvings and artifacts they believed to be linked to the ancient Aztecs. Say what you want about the conspiracy theories surrounding Oak Island, there's no denying the physical proof that somewhere on this island is even more treasure. For now, we just need to wait and see what else they find. All right, what did you think of these wild discoveries dug out of the ground? Which of them would you most prefer to find? Perhaps while digging in your garden or out for a stroll? Tell me in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time for another amazing video.